You're listening to the Hollister My Ostomy podcast. People who provided testimonials received compensation from Hollister Incorporated. The testimonials, statements and opinions presented are applicable to the people depicted. These testimonials are representative of their experience, but the exact results and experience will be unique and individual to each person. The information provided herein is not medical advice and is not intended to substitute for the advice of your personal physician or other healthcare provider. This information should not be used to seek help in a medical emergency. If you experience a medical emergency, seek medical treatment in person immediately. I'm Sue Lennon and today I'm speaking to Alice Rayner. Hi Alice.
Hi Sue, thanks for having me.
Oh gosh, it's such a pleasure and it seems like absolutely yonks since we spoke. And I know that we're going to be speaking about pregnancy and childbirth as the main kind of theme of this discussion. But I think it's quite important that we set that experience in the context of your health history.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you started with IBD or were diagnosed with IBD as a child, yeah?
Yeah. So I was about 11 or 12, I can't remember, when I was diagnosed. Kind of the classic, the red flag was obviously having blood in the stool, and so my mum kind of got me to the GP, and they diagnosed me really quickly. Actually, you hear a lot of people who struggle to get a diagnosis for a long time, but I think maybe because I was a child, they obviously took it quite seriously. I was quite lucky to have it very mildly. It only sort of affected quite a small part of my bowel, so I was able to get it under control with medication quite easily, and then I was pretty much in remission until my 20s. So I had a sort of a big long period where I was just taking maintenance drugs, and I was quite happy and healthy as a teenager, which was really great. In my 20s it kind of kicked back off again and was much more aggressive this time. Again, quite a sort of classic story, I think, of kind of going through medications, having them work for a few months and then getting ill again, having another flare up. And I sort of got to the point where I was kind of just in and out of hospital. I'd kind of be patched up, discharged. I'd go home, go back to work for a couple of months and then start, getting ill again and being readmitted. So, I went through kind of all the medications, infliximab, vedolizumab, mercaptopurine, etc. And it was kind of the sort of final sort of flare-up actually happened. I just got back from a holiday in Sri Lanka and I noticed blood in the toilet, and I just sort of deep down I was like, well, this is it. There's no more medication left for me to try. So I sort of knew if this one gets bad, it'll be surgery. But kind of by that point I'd kind of got to the point where I was I'd had enough of all the medications and the sort of in and out of hospital and kind of having it hanging over you. So at that point I was kind of, quite ready for surgery. But it got, as expected, it was a really bad flare up. I ended up losing a lot of blood. I had to go in and have a blood transfusion. My bowel kind of started hemorrhaging. So at that point surgery was kind of the only option because of the sort of state that I was in, just sort of losing blood and so ill I couldn't sort of couldn't really stand up or walk or anything. I was so weak. So that was when I was 26. At that point I'd kind of had IBD badly for kind of 5 or 6 years, but had it kind of been diagnosed for 15 years at that point when I had the surgery. Yeah,
I remember you saying to me that you were so sick that you were nearly begging for surgery, and that really touched me, I've got to say, when you said that. But I was wondering, since we're talking about women's things, what was the influence on all of that with regard to kind of puberty, I suppose, starting your periods, etc.? Was that all normal?
Yeah, that was all normal actually. Like I said, I was quite lucky to have it so mildly during my sort of teenage years that thankfully it didn't have an impact on me from that point of view. My periods have always been very regular. I mean, I've very healthy apart from, in every other sense apart from my bowel that just kept trying to kill me. But everything else was quite smooth. And then I met my now husband when I was 19, so kind of just before I started getting ill, and it didn't even really come up when we met because it hadn't been an issue for so long. But he was really supportive kind of throughout. So from a kind of that point of view, I got a boyfriend when I was healthy, and he kind of stuck by me through the trials and tribulations.
So he kind of learned your disease alongside you, really, at the same time?
Yeah, at the same time, because it was new to me. Because the first time I got ill, I was put on sulfasalazine at that point, which was just a sort of maintenance. I just had to take a couple of those a day. So I'd kind of almost forgotten that I had it. And then so when it started, getting really bad, and then I was on steroids, and I was having to have, enemas and suppositories and things, which is, obviously for a kind of a, teenage sort of late 20s girl, that's quite sort of, embarrassing to sort of be having to take that medication. Yeah, I was kind of learning it all myself, and he was just sort of, there by my side throughout it as well.
Yeah, what a hero. So I was thinking about, you mentioned already that you went to Sri Lanka, and I believe you went off on holiday to Tanzania also. Yeah,
we've done a lot of travelling when we've been able to. Annoyingly, I think I mentioned before that the colitis really kind of just like got in the way a lot. So Tanzania was kind of our big holiday that we went to go on after we graduated. But I'd had a really bad flare up during my finals, and I had to have kind of like extra time, and I had to have a special room to do my exams in and that, because I needed to be able to access the toilet at split second. Anyone listening who has Crohn's or colitis will understand that feeling of when you need to go, and there's nothing that can stand in your way, not even a university exam final. So luckily after my exams, that's when I was put on infliximab for the first time, and that sort of patched me up, and I was well enough to go on holiday to Tanzania, and we'd planned this huge, big sort of backpacking trip. And about halfway through, the colitis flared back up again, and there's worse places to be stranded, because we managed to get to the beach, which was obviously amazing, but it just meant that we'd got 2 months where we were meant to be backpacking, but we spent 1 month of it just sort of lying on the beach, not really enjoying it, because obviously I was having to, run into the bushes every, 10 or 12 times a day for my bowels. So it wasn't, the relaxing beach that you'd think. But, there were worse places to be stranded, but I just couldn't get on a bus, I couldn't get on a train, couldn't get in a car, because I just couldn't be more than a couple of minutes away from a toilet. So it really ruined that trip for us. We managed to go on safari in the first half of the trip, which was lovely, but we didn't manage to do kind of half of the rest of the stuff that we'd planned, and that happened quite a few times. Various kind of smaller trips as well that kind of weren't enjoyable because of it. Just, like a week in Mallorca or whatever, we weren't able to enjoy. I missed out on a lot of things like concerts with my friends, gigs, things that we'd booked that ended up, I was in a hospital bed instead of seeing Blink 182 at one point, which was pretty annoying. The colitis has kind of had a lot to answer for kind of getting in the way of those experiences.
Yeah. So when it actually came to surgery, that was, I think, I'm getting the impression anyway, that was seen very much as a positive step by now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd had a few years to kind of prepare for the idea, I suppose, because, we were kind of burning through the different medications, and every time they stopped working, I was like, okay, how many have I got left to try before surgery? But by the end, I was just, I was so ill. I was just, losing blood. I'd lost about 2 stone in weight in about a month or less. I just couldn't keep anything down. I couldn't eat. I was just being sick and, going to the toilet kind of 20 times a day, but it was just pure blood. At one point I thought I was going to bleed to death, because I think my bowel was actually starting to hemorrhage and I was getting kind of blood clots. And I just thought, oh my God, if they don't sort me out, I'm going to die. And at this point I was kind of on the waiting list for surgery. It was kind of semi-emergency, because they could see that I was in a bad way. But there was a couple of more priority cases that had to be done first. So I kind of had a week to wait until my surgery. And that week was just awful. I think I went into A&E twice during that time because my mum was so worried about me. Like every time my temperature sort of went up a little bit, she was like, oh my God, you need to go in. And they just sort of kept sending me back home because they said, well, you're just waiting for your surgery. So there's nothing we can do for you here that we couldn't do, that you can't, you might as well be comfortable while you're waiting. But it was really, really agonising. And then when we finally got to surgery day, it was like a celebration really, and I woke up from surgery and it might have been the morphine that I was on, but I think it was also just the kind of the relief, and I just felt instantly it was like this diseased they took out my whole bowel, 4 foot of bowel, and it was all just diseased, and I was just like, thank God that's just gone. I was just felt free, like that I was rid of it. And I was quite euphoric actually. I sent my auntie an email and I was just like, oh my gosh, like she said it was a very strange email to receive from someone who just woken up from surgery, but I was apparently just euphoric about it. It was such a relief after kind of years of suffering to kind of think this could be the start of the start of my new life.
Yeah, and I've certainly heard that from other people who have woken up feeling well. You're waking up in ICU feeling well. It's kind of bizarre.
It really was. Like I instantly, and because I hadn't eaten in about a month, I couldn't even keep down a piece of toast because it was just like my digestive system was kind of saying, just don't put anything in there because I can't handle it, lower down. So I was so ill and I just was so weak, and I just woke up feeling, just better, just well. And I think I just ate a whole bowl of macaroni cheese because I wasn't really thinking. And the doctor was just like, hey, you should maybe have given your bowel a bit of a chance to, ease back into it. But I just felt that much better that I just sort of almost forgot that I was in ICU. And I was just like, oh yeah, no, I can eat. I can, it felt amazing.
So what about the body image perspective? I know lots of people get quite a reaction when they first see their bag and their stoma and all of that. How was it for you? It was remarkably okay, actually. I did feel a bit kind of self-conscious about it, but because I'd had a little bit of preparation time, they'd given me a couple of bags to try out beforehand. So I'd actually sort of experimented with sort of having one on, and I'd kind of prepared myself. And especially having seen the stoma nurse kind of in the week before my surgery, we'd actually decided kind of where to position it so that it wouldn't kind of rub on my waistband and stuff like that. So I was prepared. So it wasn't too bad. I was self-conscious the first time that my husband and I, at that point, he was my fiance. I think we were engaged at that point. And the first time that we did the deed afterwards, I was quite kind of self-conscious, and I was trying to sort of cover myself with the covers, have half of me covered and all of that. But he just said, it's such having you be well is so much more kind of attractive than having you be ill. So actually it just never really, he just didn't care about it at all, or he never let on that he did. I think he saw the bag as something that just was a sort of facilitator of living a sort of normal, healthy life again. So it never bothered him, which really helped with my confidence, obviously, because he was so supportive. So I felt good about it as well. Or at least, I sort of took a little while, but I got past it. Yeah, sure. So what about pre-operatively, given that we're going to move on in a bit to the pregnancy and childbirth part? Yeah. Was there much discussion about kind of the sexual impact of what you were about to embark on, or the fertility side of things?
There was discussion of the fertility side of things. So the operation I had was a subtotal colectomy, so they didn't actually remove the whole of my bowel. They actually just removed all of it up until the rectum, so the kind of tail end is still in situ. And they said that there was a couple of reasons that they didn't like removing it all at once. Firstly, because it would just be an even sort of bigger operation, but they want to leave the rectum in place because the options from there would be either to remove the rectum as well and have your sort of bum hole kind of sewn up, as it were, and just, nothing there. Or some people choose to have their small intestine directly attached to their anus. So that's called a J pouch. So that you basically bypass the whole of the large intestine. So some people choose to have that option. So they leave the rectum in there so you can kind of make that choice later. But the other reason that they like to leave it in is they say that either the J pouch or having it just removed and stitched up both of those can have a negative impact on fertility, because obviously the rectum's so kind of close to your ovaries and your sort of female organs, and just having sort of surgery that kind of close in the pelvis can have like higher risks of infertility. So they always say that they like to leave the rectum in place, kind of just so that you can have a better chance of having a family. And then kind of once you've finished with your reproducing, then you can have a discussion as to what you want to do with the left behind rectum. Mm-hmm. So that sort of came up kind of as a discussion with the doctors, which was really helpful. Obviously, as a woman in your 20s, that's kind of something that you're glad that that's taken into account.
Yeah, and they took the lead on that. Your healthcare team took the lead on that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. If it wasn't for, I think by the point we were having that conversation, I think I'd looked into it kind of in the past, sort of knowing that it was probably something that would happen to me in the future. But at the point that we were having that conversation, I was, so unwell that I wouldn't have thought to kind of think about kind of, what are the risks and, future. I wasn't in that frame of mind at that point. So it was all on them for kind of bringing that up, which was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done then. So you had your surgery and you recovered and you were ready to go back to work. But I don't actually know what kind of work you do. So can you just tell me briefly about that?
I do social research. So I look into sort of people's attitudes and behaviours about various issues. So I'm normally on the other side of the interview, kind of asking people questions about themselves. But I work for the civil service, so they were very flexible in terms of letting me kind of have the time off sick, obviously, but then doing like a phased return and kind of doing just a couple of hours a week at first, and then kind of building up slowly. So that was good. It was really, really good to have such a supportive employer.
Yeah, excellent. And what about the timing of going back to work? Did you feel that you'd got that right, or it was a bit too soon, or did you push yourself too much?
Yeah, I pushed myself. I think if anyone's sort of about to go into this surgery and thinking about going back to work after, I definitely went back too quickly. I think because I was on such a high from kind of like not being ill anymore, I kind of forgot that I'd actually had a major surgery and had a whole organ removed. So I did kind of take the minimum amount that I think they said, 4 to 12 weeks to recover or something. And I think I went back after 4.5. So, I think that was too soon. And I think it did set me back a bit because my phase return ended up sort of taking kind of 4 months or something for me to get back up to full time, because I think I just was trying to do too much too soon. So, if I was to do it again, I'd take a couple of more weeks.
Did that have an impact on your sort of psychology, how you were coping psychologically, aside from the body image stuff?
I think I was sort of in that mindset of like, right, it's done, move on, get on with life again. I was struggling a bit mentally, not with the bag itself, but with the fact that I'd been so ill before. But afterwards, I did have some sort of kind of weird, and I've since seen a therapist because I had some mental health issues after having my baby as well, and we kind of went back to this sort of point in time as well, and she thought that I might have been suffering from a sort of post-traumatic stress symptoms because I did feel that I was close to death, and it was almost having that sort of near-death experience that you kind of afterwards, I was sort of reflecting on it, and I was kind of having sort of intrusive thoughts, thinking, what if I had died, or like, what if I am really dead and that this is actually just a dream or something, or, and I was very jumpy. Like every time my husband would walk into the room, I would just like, startle and kind of, yelp. So I think my sort of, fight or flight response was really heightened. Looking back again, I probably should have taken a little bit more time sort of mentally to kind of process what had happened. But like I said, I just sort of wanted to brush it off and move on at the time. But I think having that sort of trauma did mean that it was sort of more likely for me to sort of have problems in my pregnancy with my mental health as well, because I'd never kind of resolved that kind of trauma of thinking I was going to die. And that, did sort of come back to bite me a little bit later on.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was going to lead things in time, I guess, the connection, and also the connection between, when you're really stressed with IBD, it's more likely that you're going to have a flare. And so, the stress symbolises a massive negative outcome.
Yeah, I got quite sort of obsessive about, and I still feel a bit like this actually, about getting enough rest. like enough sleep. I get quite sort of panicky if I don't get enough sleep, because I think sort of deep down I'm like, oh my God, if I'm not rested and that, then I'll have another flare up. I've got that kind of connection somewhere sort of in my brain. So I do get quite kind of obsessive about getting enough rest and that, because I know that the flip side of it is getting stressed and getting ill. So
yeah, and it's certainly something I've heard from other people as well, this need to manage stress and manage rest, and to help your body to be well. Yeah. So anyway, we'll move on to happier conversation for a little while. You got married and you went off on your honeymoon to New Zealand, which I have to say I'm massively jealous about.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. And, that was like just the best holiday ever, because I didn't have to worry about getting ill. We were sort of staying in like hostels and stuff a little bit, because we wanted to go for as long as we could. So that meant kind of budgeting a little bit. So yeah, managing in like a shared bathroom in a hostel with a stoma bag was a little bit... Yeah, I had to think a little bit more about it than you would sort of pre-stoma. But apart from that, it was just great not to have to worry about it. And, being able to go on sort of long car drives and things and not think about like, oh, I need to be, so close to the nearest toilet. So yeah, it was an amazing honeymoon, and New Zealand is just beautiful.
And you did everything. I remember you saying, we did everything.
Yeah, I did like this cliff jumping thing, which... I don't know why I did it, but I think it was to somehow prove some kind of point about, how nothing could stop me or something. But I did this cliff jumping, which was just terrifying. I wouldn't really recommend it. But yeah, we did everything. We did like sort of like whitewater rafting, and we just did loads, like all of the sort of activities. It was just amazing. Like just lots of long hikes, went on a boat trip, kayaking. We did paragliding as well, where you like run off the edge of the mountain and like float around, and that was brilliant. And then at my hen do, we all went surfing, which was...
So you did all hilarious. Of the things that
so I've done, since having my stoma, I've done, all of those things and had no issues at all with it.
Yeah, all of those things that would have been out of your reach previously.
Completely, yeah.
And so you decided that it was time to have a baby.
Yes.
And off you went.
Yeah, so we thought it'd be nice to have a spring baby or a summer baby, but we've got a January baby, so that shows that things happened a bit quicker than we were initially anticipating. But yeah, not many problems. No problems conceiving anyway. Pregnancy was, from a stoma point of view, pregnancy was very smooth. Back to the sort of mental health point as well, I kind of struggled. I don't think I'd realised how kind of much it had impacted me, the experience of having colitis and being so ill, until we went in for our 12-week scan. And I was sitting outside the ultrasound room, and I realised that I was in the same corridor that I'd been in when I was really ill before my surgery. Suddenly the sort of the smell of the like hospital just hit me, and I just had a panic attack. And I've never had one before. And it was just like as if being back in there had just kind of sent all of this adrenaline or something to my system. And I just wanted to run. It was just like my body was saying, like, this is not a safe place. Get out, get out. So that was really kind of horrible. And kind of from that point on, I just had this every time I sort of walked into the hospital, that I just sort of like had this horrible sort of anxiety. And they hooked me up with a maternity counsellor who was really good, and she sort of like talked through everything, and how having a baby is different to being ill. Like, you're still in hospital, but it's for a positive reason, not a negative reason, and all of this. And that was very helpful. But then I got gestational diabetes, which kind of medicalised the pregnancy again. And from that point, I was always going to be consultant led because of the stoma, but from that point it was that more likely that I was going to have an induction, and not sort of go into labour sort of naturally. So it did become a kind of more medicalised sort of, the doctors involved more than the midwives and things. So that kind of was a shame, because I think that it sort of, that stopped me being able to sort of see it as such a positive thing. I think it kind of just reminded me more of being ill than something nice.
Yeah. And when you look back on it now, do you feel it was kind of, stolen's the wrong word, but
Yeah, I do. And when I do see people having like nice pregnancies, I'm a bit like, I wish I'd kind of been able to sort of you know, let go of some of that anxiety and just sort of be able to kind of embrace it a little bit more. But at the end of the day, it was, you know, I've got a kind of a healthy baby out of it, so you can't complain too much.
No, of course not. But I'm really interested in how you got hooked up with your maternity counsellor. Who was it that made that happen?
It was my consultant. So like I said, because of the stoma, they put me under consultant-led care sort of straight away. Not necessarily, they said there wasn't particularly any like extra risks that they knew of. It was just kind of like, because it was, you know, a different scenario to normal, and that there might be, if I had to have a cesarean, that, you know, they might need to sort of look at where my kind of existing scars are and stuff. So they wanted me to be under the consultant. And I mentioned it in the first appointment with them. I said, you know, because we were talking a lot about the stoma and sort of how that might impact pregnancy, and, you know, that I might be more likely to get a hernia and things like that as the baby grew. And so I said, you know, I think actually there's also like the mental health side of this, because I think that I'm sort of got some unresolved sort of issues going on in the back of my head for me to feel so sort of panicky when I come near you guys. And they were like, yeah, that's really understandable. We actually have a midwife who's a trained counsellor, and she kind of deals with people that have got kind of issues. So that was really helpful. She was lovely.
Yeah, it's excellent. It's just really great to know that there's somebody on the team like that, isn't there? And who would know? You mentioned as well about the likelihood of hernia at some point during your pregnancy. Did that happen to you?
It did. So as it was probably when I was 30 plus weeks, you know, I was starting to sort of really get quite big. I did notice that just sort of beneath the stoma, it had like popped out a little bit. And I did speak to my surgical team about it, and they said, oh, we'll just keep an eye on it and see what happens after the baby's born. And it actually just sort of seemed to go away. I haven't seen it since.
Excellent.
So that was good.
Absolutely.
Didn't have to worry about it. Yeah.
And as far as your skin's concerned, I know this comes up quite often with people going through menopause. You know, will my skin be different because of hormonal changes? Was that an issue for you?
Yeah, I didn't really have any issues with the bag. I know some people say they have issues with it kind of sticking and things because of their skin getting, like you say, like oilier or whatever. Yeah, I didn't. I actually found that, weirdly, I think because my stomach was more firm being pregnant, I actually got a much better seal with my bag. Like it just stuck a lot better. And I could get kind of 3 days out of it, whereas normally it's 2. So I think just having that firm, you know, almost makes me think maybe I should go and, you know, get some abs, but, you know, not quite. But yeah, having the firm stomach actually kind of helped a bit with the adhesion, which was interesting.
Yeah. But Alice, I think about going to get some abs every day and I never do anything about it.
The incentive's just not there, is it really?
So what about being induced? That happened, I think, didn't it?
It did, yeah, I was induced. It was a really alarming birth because I was induced, and everyone had said, like all the doctors, all my friends, everyone on the internet had said, oh, you know, get yourself prepared for a really long slog, because when you're induced, the baby's not quite ready and it just takes ages, and, you know, you're going to be in there for like 3 days. And, you know, so I was like, I went in with books to read and all of this. And in the end, my labour was, I think, less than an hour in total.
Wow.
So it happened very, very fast. I was induced in the morning and she was born in the evening. So for the first sort of, you know, 6 or 7 hours, just sort of nothing happened. And then as soon as things started ramping up, they just ramped up really, really fast. But yes, she arrived in a dramatic fashion, and she was fine. Her name's Lottie. But yeah, it was actually, I mean, the contractions were really, really painful. Like really, really painful. But the actual giving birth bit wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So that was kind of, you know, quite interesting and maybe reassuring to anyone else who might be pregnant. And actually the whole thing was less painful than the ulcerative colitis, when my bowel was kind of tearing itself apart and I was, you know, pooing blood. That was more painful than giving birth.
Yeah, but it's a really good measure for people that haven't got ulcerative colitis as to how awful it is, you know?
Yeah, I think it depends how severe it is, because obviously when I was 11 and I had it very mildly, it obviously wasn't anywhere near that painful. But when it was kind of at the really extreme end, it was, yeah, agony, worse than childbirth, yeah.
It's such a difficult thing to explain pain, isn't it? Or to get other people to understand. The other thing I wanted to ask was whether the stoma featured on your birth plan at all, whether you had any worries about kind of what was going to happen as you were pushing.
Yes, so I did. I wanted someone to press on the stoma itself because I was worried about the hernia popping out. And I was weirdly worried about my rectum because obviously that was left in situ. And I've never really quite understood how it's kind of still attached. Like I wasn't sure if it was just like floating around in there or if it was like stitched into, the lining of my stomach or what. So I was kind of worried because they say, when women give birth that they poo because they're pushing so hard. I was like, but I've not got anything to poo out. So what if I just like accidentally push out my rectum? And everyone told me that's not possible at all. Like that's just doesn't make any sense. But I did ask to have someone like sort of putting pressure in that area as well, and actually they said that's something that they do anyway to help with tears. So I did ask for that, but that was something that apparently I would have been given anyway.
Yeah, and I'm really interested in that actually, because it's something, if you're a visual person, you can really imagine what might happen to your rectum, can't you? In the same way that your belly button pops out, well, why wouldn't my bottom pop out?
Yeah, exactly. I was just like, with all that pressure, what if it just pops out? And the doctor was just like, that can't happen. But once, like you say, it's the visual. Once you've got that idea in your head, it's quite hard not to,
absolutely.
to let go.
Absolutely. So what about discussions about Lottie's kind of chances of having a colitis or an IBD issue?
Yeah, I mean, that did come up, and that came up when we were trying for a baby, because I kind of said I really don't want her to go through what I've been through. Like I would feel so guilty kind of if that ended up happening, and we did speak to the doctor about it as well, and they said there's just not really, they say that there is a genetic component to IBD, but they don't know how much necessarily that is, and they have done studies on kind of identical twins and things, but the fact that I'm the only one in my family with IBD, like none of my close or extended family have it, they said, in your case, it might be more of an environmental something that triggered it rather than genetic. So my husband sort of said, well, if anything was to happen, you've at least she'll be well supported because you know what she's going through and you'll be able to kind of advocate for her. So, don't let it stop you doing what you want with your life, just, for fear of that. So it did come up and we did talk about it, but yeah, we decided it wasn't enough of a risk to not have children.
And there she is, all beautiful. And how old is she now?
She's 2 now. Yeah, she's a proper toddler now.
Yeah, and doesn't time just fly by? Gosh, you really notice it when you're a mum, I think.
Yeah, they say the days go slow, but the years go fast.
Yes, it's absolutely true. You're listening to Sue Lennon with Alice Rayner on My Ostomy podcast. In terms of kind of post-baby now, she's 2, like you said. And what about things like lifting the baby out of a cot or swimming and engaging with other activities? I know it's been rather difficult this year, but
yes. Yeah, no, with lifting and that it was okay, because I think by that point I was quite well healed. I've always been more anxious about kind of like coughing and sneezing. That's when I would kind of hold my stoma, or like put some pressure on. I don't suppose I ever lift anything particularly heavy, but yeah, with the baby. I did have a few issues with leakage, actually, that I've just remembered after Lottie was born, because my tummy went back to being quite flabby, flibby. And I just wasn't getting such a good seal with the bag, and I think my stoma had like retracted a little bit. So I had to go up a convexity level on my bag, but it took a couple of, I think because I was just so overwhelmed with looking after the baby and like being sleep deprived, there just sort of almost didn't seem time in the day just to kind of put the form in to say, can I try a sample of this new bag or whatever. So that sort of was more effort than it needed to be, almost, because I just needed to swap bags, but it just sort of somehow seemed quite insurmountable at the time. So I did have a couple of issues with leaks, which is not what you want when you're already waking up sort of 3 times a night to feed the baby. No. And then you get woken up a 4th time and you're like, oh no, I've got to go and change my bag. But yeah, that was only sort of a few weeks, and then when I changed my bag, it was fine.
Mm-hmm. And what about swimming? Do you take it to the baths or have you done?
Yeah, so I mean, I went swimming on my due date because I was trying to get her to come out naturally before I was induced. Yeah, I love swimming. It's such a good, good exercise, especially when you're pregnant and you're so heavy and it just takes the weight off. It was just lovely. So yeah, I used to go swimming once a week, and then with Lottie, we've been taking her swimming once a week as well. And I go in with her and swish her about and, jiggle her up and down. When she's little, she doesn't do much herself, but now she was starting to kind of kick and things, which was really nice to see. It's quite a workout because you're sort of swishing the baby around, but you're in the water, so you're quite well supported. So yeah, swimming's always been my kind of top choice of exercise.
So there's a couple of things I want to ask before we finish. And one is kind of, I suppose, a bit of a fantasy at the moment since you're still locked down. But when it comes time and you can travel again, what have you got on your list, given that you're quite adventurous and you've not travelled with Lottie?
Yeah, we haven't. So that's quite intimidating because I'm not really sure how you make a holiday work with a child because we've not really done it. We're actually trying to cut down on our flights at the moment for the climate. We realised that we kind of had burnt through probably much more than our fair share of carbon. But we've got a kind of top 3 that we want to do, but sort of spaced out, and then doing kind of UK holidays otherwise. But we really want to go to Canada, and I think that would be quite child friendly as well, and especially there wouldn't be a language barrier. And we'd love to go back to New Zealand, but it's such a long flight. I don't think that Lottie would cope, but Canada would be the place that we'd spend our sort of carbon budget on next, and then do a few years of UK holidays to kind of make up for it after that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Actually, I worry about my carbon footprint too. So if you had to collect all of the bits of advice you were given along the way and decide what advice you would offer other people, what would be on your list?
Oh, well, my first bit of advice, I think, was actually taking the time to recover. And I think that applies to both surgery and childbirth as well, because I know a lot of women do try and kind of bounce back quite soon, but I think you need to look after your body and take your time. Generally, advice about having a stoma would be to not to do it. I'm not saying everyone should just run out and start taking bits of their body out, but if you're at the stage that I was where your quality of life is so low and you're not able to do the things that you enjoy, it can actually, it's sort of seen, I think, a lot as a last resort, but actually it can really give you a whole new lease of life and make things a lot easier. If like me, you don't have too many issues with your bag or with anything, then it's such a life changer. And get help for your mental health as well. I think there's so much focus on the kind of physical side of things. Actually, on the sort of Facebook groups, you get people who are looking to become pregnant or have just become pregnant saying, did you guys have any issues with your stoma? Were you able to have a vaginal birth or a C-section? And it all focuses very much on that. But what I always say is actually look out for your mental health as well, because it might bring up kind of past issues from being ill before and being back in hospital. You could have that sort of, adrenaline kind of overload, sort of like I did, and I think that people kind of forget that can be something that happens. So to look out for that and to get help early. I wish I'd sort of gone to the GP about my sort of postnatal anxiety and depression a bit sooner. I think there's a perception that because it's postnatal that it kind of goes away on its own, but actually it's it's worth getting help for. So yes, look after your mental health as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think quite often you did mention it, actually, the kind of internal dialogue about not being a great mum or in some way kind of failing can stop you going to the GP. So I'm really glad that you've brought that up and that you've got the help that you need. And then the other question is, what about online support or other sources of support around your IBD, your stoma care, just linking with other ostomates? How have you gone about that and what was useful to you?
Yeah, so I mean, that's just brilliant. I'm on a lot of Facebook groups There's a few that are really supportive. There's like an ostomy and J-pouch moms, which is obviously American, so hence the moms group, which is obviously specifically for mothers. And that's interesting because then you'll get some people who are they've got their ostomy or J-pouch and then they're getting pregnant. And then on the other side, you've got people that have got kids and they're going in for surgery and they're like, how can I recover from surgery with a toddler around? And then you've also got people whose children are going in for surgery, so they're sort of asking for advice, but that's a supportive community. And then there's a UK-based one called Making Ostomies Cool, which I really like because there's a lot of kind of positivity on there, and people will join and say, I've got my surgery coming up, I'm really nervous, like what's going to happen? And you get a lot of people kind of saying, your life's going to change, it's going to be much better, it's going to, you're going to get a new lease of life. So that one's really nice because, it's positive. Obviously, it's not all positive, but, when people struggle, everyone's there to support. So that's really nice. And it does feel nice to have these kind of groups of kind of like-minded people. So that's really supportive.
It's great that you've had such excellent support from your peers, isn't it? And I'm thinking, we're here to talk about my ostomy, but actually your ostomy's been the least of your problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the pregnancy, it was just, I really thought that my stoma was going to cause so many issues, and then it ended up being the diabetes that was really the sort of the kicker. None of the sort of, I wouldn't have had to be induced or anything just from having the stoma. So the kind of, the issues that I had around that were all diabetes related rather than stoma related.
Well, I wish you all the best of luck, and I'm sure that Lottie's going to bring you massive, massive joy throughout her life, and some dose of stress as well, especially in the teenage years.
Especially with a 2-year-old, it's very much extremes at the moment. She can be absolutely delightful and you just want to cry because she's so cute, and she'll come out with something lovely, and then 10 minutes later she's having an absolute tantrum because you gave her the wrong cup, and you're like, oh god,
hell mum, not that cup.
Obviously not the red cup.
Wait, the next thing will be don't cut my sandwiches into squares, I want triangles.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sure your story is going to really touch other people and really, really help and reassure folks who are looking at pregnancy post-ostomy. And I can only say a massive thank you. I'm really, really impressed at your openness and honesty, and I'm very touched. So thanks loads.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It was really nice to share, and hopefully it'll help someone on their journey.
I have absolutely no doubt that it will. Thanks for listening to My Ostomy, brought to you by Hollister Incorporated.